Hello everyone, ladies, gentlemen, and otaku alike. This is Recall Reviews. Attilio back here again, and today I've got another camera video for you. Now, if this camera turns out to be pretty okay, I will eventually include it into my larger camera comparison video. But this is a real in-depth look at an NBD brand camera. I'll give you a closer look here. This is an NBD brand camera. This is a branded camera you can find occasionally on eBay, which is where I got this for about $30. $25 for the camera and about $5 to $7 of shipping, so about $30 or so I got this camera for. This camera itself is from 2022, so it is a few years old. But this is a brand you can find on Amazon as well as AliExpress. I know, somewhere other than Temu. Temu has cameras very similar to NBD, but something about the NBD brand is just separate enough from the other no-name brand cameras. What NBD stands for, I really don't know, but we're going to take a look at the white balance settings, the audio capabilities, because this does accept external microphones, and we'll have 3 microphones to test: a cheap Temu mic, my Takstar, which you're hearing now on my Sony 4K, and a wireless lavalier mic I picked up on Amazon for 20 bucks. So let's take a look and do a deep dive into this camera, the NBD 4K Ultra HD Video. Let's see if it's true. So this is what the NBD camera looks like. It's set to 4K 60 frames a second, which is its highest frame rate and its highest resolution. Now, I'm going to show some of the other resolutions when we get past the point of the video where we go through the white balance settings, because like other cheaper cameras that we've looked at, this does have multiple white balance setting, which are the same old generic. You have auto, you have sunny, you have fluorescent, you have all the other go-throughs. And I think for the most part, fluorescent might end up being the best one yet again. Right now it's set to auto white balance. So we're going to go through the usual spots that I test based on lighting, based on many other things, and also check out the zoom function. But this is what it looks like and sounds like right out of the box in its highest resolution, highest frame rate. Again, if you're looking at it on the screen, it's going to look choppy. The screen can't keep up with what the actual sensor's picking up. But based on my preliminary tests, it looks like it's actually pretty okay. And it seemed like when I tested it in 30 frames a second, it was in actual 30 frames a second. So now we're going to start hitting the other corners so we can test out the different lighting. This is what it looks like in what I always call the better lit corner, which, yeah, in hindsight maybe not so much, but it's a decent corner to test different lighting. At this point, I will say I do have the attachable lens, which is a macro lens, or at least it's labeled a macro lens. It gives you a much larger field of view. After we do the white balance tests, I'll show you what this looks like with and without the lens on, but now let's move on to the other corner. And based on my preliminary testing, I gotta say I was very surprised by the actual kind of video quality and a little bit in the audio quality department as far as this camera went when I did my pre-video testing, so I can kind of test a couple of the functions of the camera before I do the full in-depth in this video. Again, this is what it looks like here with the quote macro lens. Again, it's a much larger field of view, and I gotta say I am pretty surprised. We're also going to do a more in-depth audio test very soon after we do the white balance demonstration. And I think we're going to basically jump them throughout between in front of the fireplace and the mantle and this corner, because these seem to be the best filming spots in the downstairs. So here we are again. I have it set to its sunny function, which is what would be the daylight white balance on most other cameras. I also switched it from 4K 60 frames a second to 4K 30 frames a second, mainly because that was the first function that I tested and it seemed to work real well. So on the off chance that the 60 frames a second didn't look good, well, at least this I know works. So this is what it looks like again to the sunny or daylight white balance setting. Now let's check it out in the VHS corner. Here we go now, back in the VHS corner in the daylight or sunny white balance setting. This is what it looks like, and again, between the mantle and here seem to be the best filming locations as far as getting the best lighting, the best quality. That and of course facing the couch. So now we're going to move on to the next white balance setting. So we're set now to the cloudy white balance setting. And at least through the screen, it looks like there's virtually no difference between the daylight or sunny and the cloudy. So maybe that's just based on where we are. Again, I've never found a location where a cloudy white balance setting would fit whatever the filming was needed. I've tried it outside before when it was cloudy, and it never seemed like it really did anything with any past cameras. But now, back to the VHS corner. Here we are, cloudy in the VHS corner. Again, one of the better filming locations. This is what it looks like. Really not too much else to say. It doesn't look too separated from what we already looked at. Now let's take a look at the next white balance setting. We're here now, and it's in its incandescent white balance setting, which based on the colorization on the screen, looks like it's the tungsten white balance setting, like the previous cameras that we've looked at had. Why the different names? I'm not entirely sure, but this is undoubtedly the tungsten white balance setting. This is what it looks like in front of the mantle, and we'll take a quick look at it in front of the VHS corner. Now, it's here you're probably going to notice a little bit more of a lens flare effect from the lighting in the room with the specific lens that is on this camera. You can probably see some of the glare on the television, but that's not necessarily what we're looking at. Again, this is the incandescent or tungsten white balance setting in front of the VHS corner. Now, I believe the next one is the fluorescent, which in my experience with these older or cheaper cameras is the best setting, so let's take a look. So this is what it looks like in its fluorescent white balance setting, and I have a suspicion based on how it looks on the screen that as far as indoor filming goes, I think fluorescent, even maybe with a little color correction, will be the best way to go about filming with a camera like this, or maybe even for this entire brand, inside a lit room with this kind of lighting, or even in a bedroom with, you know, either headlamps or lights, whatever it is that you have lighting you. With some color correction, it can really look sharp. Let's take a look at the VHS corner now. Right here now in the VHS corner, in the fluorescent, which is the only one that retained the original name fluorescent as the white balance setting, aside from auto, because that goes for everything. But this is what it looks like here, and again, I have the suspicion that this may be the best setting to keep it in as far as general filming indoors, and even maybe if you're in a room with more yellow lighting. This may be the way to go, and again, color correction can go a long way in prettying up the image. But I'm going to switch it to its auto white balance setting for the remainder of this video as I go through the different frame rates as well as the audio abilities of this camera. Now, 2 more tests left as far as this camera goes. I'm going to show you what it looks like without the lens, and then we're going to go back to the lens, because I rather like how it looks with the larger field of view. So this is what it looks like without the lens. It's a much tighter shot, much closer to what you'll usually see based on when I film up at the mantle like this. It's really closer to the usual framing and tightness that I usually tend to like. But as far as this camera goes, I kind of like the larger field of view that this particular lens gets it. So I'm going to reattach the lens, and then we're going to do the resolution frames per second test. The camera is now set to 2.7K 30 frames a second. I don't know how much of a video quality drop you're going to see, but the frame rate based on my tests are true to what's advertised. And again, this is what it looks like. The interesting one is its 1080p because it has 3 different functions. So let's start going through the frame rates that 1080p has. Now, if in fact this does look good, this is 1080p, which is not a bad resolution for a majority of content and videos. Yes, the YouTube algorithm pushes 4K content more, but in the chance that the best you can work with is 1080p, 1080p at 120 frames a second will really get you nice, buttery, smooth looking frame rates in video. And at, again, 1080p, it's high definition and will look good on a majority of screens today, and is more than suitable enough for live streaming and any kinds of things in that vein that you are doing. I might test this camera out and see if it could be a good webcam too. Who knows, this might actually be worth it. But we're going to jump down to the next frame. Now it's very possible that even for some, 1080p 60 frames a second is more than worth taking a hit in the video quality department. Yes, 30 frames a second for higher resolutions and even lower resolutions technically is very good. And it's kind of just the standard baseline that everything should be kind of fastened to, whether it's games, movies, film, or whatever it is. But 60 frames a second at 1080p, if it looks good, might be a good option. It might be a good choice. So now we're going to test the 30 frames a second, which is, if you have a 4K camera that can go 30 frames a second, there's no need to ever go to 30 frames on 1080p if you can get better video quality out of it with the same frame rate, but let's take a look anyway. And here it is, 1080p, 30 frames a second. For the most part, as far as live streaming goes or doing Let's Play videos, this would be plenty fine. I tend to try and hit closer to the 2.7K, 4K video quality. I actually use one of the Temu cameras for my webcam now, which works out pretty well for me, I think. But if this can work as a webcam, this might be a more than viable option. We'll see how it goes. I doubt that it'll connect since this is actually made to be a camera, and I don't think it's an actual webcam that's jammed into a camera body like other cheap cameras are. But this is, again, 1080p, 30 frames a second. Tell me what you guys think. Alright, so, again, it's set back to its auto white balance, and we're going to test 3 different external microphones on this camera. Because, again, this can accept external microphones. So I've got 3 different that we're going to use. The first one we're going to test is a cheap external microphone that came with one of the Temu DV, I think it came with the Temu DV2. So we're going to test this out with it. We're also going to test out my trusty Takstar shotgun mic, which even on lower end cameras seems to have successfully gotten pretty decent audio. And last but not least, we're going to test a wireless lavalier mic, which supposedly has a range of 30 feet. Obviously, we're not going to do a range test in this case, but we're going to give this a try. And if it sounds good on this, I may switch to using that instead of the Takstar for my main shooting camera. Just see how that works for a couple videos. But let's jump into the audio test.
So this is what the wireless lavalier mic sounds like hooked up to the NBD camera here. And this microphone was a $20 lavalier microphone. I do have it on. It's hidden right here under the shirt. because I never like the look in videos where you can see the microphone, but this way it's at least hitting amongst all the chest hair. I'm going to do a video in the future where I test this with my Sony FDR AX43, my usual workhorse camera. If the audio sounds good with that camera, then I will obviously release it. If not, then I'm going to have a lot of reshoots. But this microphone, the wireless lavalier mic, connected to the NBD, with me doing more of my natural speaking voice. I'm still kind of speaking the way I would in my traditional videos, but I'm speaking in a much lighter tone of voice. Instead of my usual, I'm trying to project more radio voice as far as it goes, because with the microphone this close to your face, and in my experience, the gain on this microphone, and microphones like this have been very intense.
So now I've got the external microphone, the cheap one that came with the Temu DV2. I have it set, and I have it basically set as far as the dBs as this regular flat line. I'm going to switch it over to the plus 20 and see if it makes a difference. It's set now to plus 20 dB. On the Temu DV2, it actually does make a bit of a difference, as well as other cameras that I've tried it on, but sometimes with a set like this, it's just not worked properly at all, depending on the camera. I know it didn't work on the Zostuic 4K point and shoot, but this is how it sounds as far as this goes. I now have the Takstar shotgun mic hooked up to the camera. This is what it sounds like. I'm going to experience it for the first time when I edit the video, and I'll let you know my final thoughts when I get to that point in the video. But this is what it sounds like with the Takstar. No extra settings. I have it set the exact same way I do with my main camera and any camera that I test this on. Again, this is what it sounds like in my elevated speaking voice, which is kind of like my radio voice that I use when I make these videos. I certainly don't talk in person the way I project here, but this is what it sounds like. Well, there you have it, everyone. That was as in-depth of a look as I can get at the NBD 4K Ultra HD digital point-and-shoot mirrorless, whatever you want to call it, camera. It is a pretty decent little camera for, number one, for being a 2022 off-brand or no branded decisions is, well, what I've taken to calling it, because it kind of just makes me laugh. I just thought of that a little bit before I turned on the camera. NBD, no brand decisions, a no brand decisions camera. Considering the fact that I got this for $25 or $30 or so on eBay. It's a 2022 off-brand 4K camera that's got some heft, it's got some weight to it. It's a chunky little thing, but it's a nice little compact where you can't really throw it in your pocket, but it'll fit nice in your bag. It is a 4K camera. It does record in native 4K, but with a sensor this size, and you can really get a good look at that, with a sensor this size, it was always doomed to have not the greatest footage, and no matter what resolution it's filming in. Compared to the size of sensor that you get in like my Sony FDR AX43 or the DJI Osmo or Pocket Series, or even the extra cameras, which are basically DJI with a different skin, like a DLC content. But I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with this camera as a beginner's camera. It's decent video quality, and even if you use 1080p with 120 frames a second, which is relatively true to what the advertised is, like the frame rate's pretty true to what it's advertised. You can get some cool slow-mo shots with that, and really do some fun, cool action and cool upshot. Like there's options with the 120 frames a second at 1080p, which is still HD quality. The 2.7K and 4K look about the same, but again, going any higher than 1080p with the sensor this size, you're really not going to see too terribly much of a difference. The audio is also not so good. The bass-in microphone, like internal mic audio, is not that good. It's clear enough, but it's very quiet. And as you heard in the video, I had to bump up the audio quite a bit for it to be audible in a meaningful way. But I gotta say, between the Takstar microphone and the cheap mic that came with the DV2 Temu mic I featured in my past camera comparison video, I gotta say, those two microphones, I was really surprised by the Temu mic, because that hasn't worked on any other camera. But that and the Takstar did a great job at increasing and making better audio for this camera. So that's an option if you get a camera like this. I'd like to look into more of the NBD brand cameras, some of the newer stuff, and they have a camcorder that's out now that I'm really interested in. But I'm starting to get tired. I'm very uncomfortable sitting. I'm still recovering from the surgery, and I wanted to thank you all for watching this longer camera rant, look at, study video, whatever you want to call it. But thank you for watching. Tune in next time. I have more great stuff coming for you very soon.